Man, we just keep cranking these episodes out, don't we, Liam?
We do. Content, content, content. That's it.
Yeah, every time we think we're going to take a week off, just no, it just doesn't happen. Anyway, welcome everyone to Pucks and Brews. I am your host, as always, Mike Shade Sparacino. As if Liam's going to call me it every time, I might as well just put it as part of the intro now. And I'm always, as always, joined by Liam, the Showmaster Godimer. Liam, what's up?
What's going on? And I
Nothing
think it's
much.
only fitting that you're Mike Shade Sparacino and I'm Liam the Showmaster Godimer. Both members of the podcast have to have nicknames. So I don't think that's a bad thing. And again, back at it for another episode, within a short time span since our last one. We broke down the Tarasenko trade. Now we're going to talk about the rest of the league. And, Shades, with the trade deadline looming, there's a lot to talk about. So.
Yeah, and we got actually a pretty good Super Bowl yesterday. Ended up being a really good game. I'm wearing my Jets shirt just because.
I gotta tell you, when I don't have a rooting interest in major sporting events, just like any of the four major sports championships, and my team is obviously not in it, it's hard for me to get engaged. But Shades, last night from start to finish, even the halftime show as well, that was a fantastic Super Bowl. Really, there's
Great
not no
game.
complaints on my end. And you know what? In a world full of complainers on social media, I didn't really see much. It's a good thing.
Yeah, actually, I haven't.
Outside of the referee play.
I mean, we can blame the referees literally every week. Yeah, so I actually like the last two Super Bowl shows I haven't been a huge fan of because I just have a thing where if I don't see somebody like playing an actual instrument, like I immediately lose a lot of interest. That's just me.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I see somebody obviously lip singing too, I lose interest. And Rihanna, last night, that was as organic as it gets. She sang really well. Nothing artificial about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. And because we forgot to also touch upon this last episode, the NHL All-Star Weekend. Kind of a yikes.
Not great, Bob.
See, you should have
Um,
did everyone should have done or should have did what I did was don't watch it live and wait for the NHL to post it either individually or all at once. Hour and a half straight through made it much easier to watch as opposed to what
Certainly,
most people were saying.
right. And I got to be honest, I didn't watch any of it. It was my first weekend here in Atlanta, and just bigger fish to fry. But it didn't really seem like I missed much. I thought it was cool what they did with the save streak challenge, for having the goaltender shoot towards the empty net, and try to score. But I think it was a travesty that Igor Shesterkin didn't get a chance to do so. If I missed it, please correct me, but I believe he didn't get a chance. I think he teamed up with Ilya Sorokin, and it was Sorokin who was taking the shots towards the empty net. You have the goaltender who loves to do it more than any other player at that position in the league, and you're not going to let him do it during a festivity event of fun during All-Star weekend. Yeah, yikes. And the All-Star game too. I mean,
Yeah,
the
no,
players
just
they give,
go back to the
do they
original, please.
do they give 30% effort? Like,
No.
like they're just walking around, hardly taking strides. And as a fan, it's hard to get, into that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was really not that fun to watch, but I will give I kind of enjoyed the thing that they did like in the beach setting where they were like basically target practice because I enjoy that because that actually requires skill. Uh the other one like on the golf course, I liked that, but it's not something that's like an NHL All-Star weekend type of thing. That's something where if it exists on the side and you hit up your friends, hey, you want to try this? Yes. But as part of an NHL All-Star weekend, just yeah,
On one hand, Shades, I'll give them credit for trying new things.
yeah,
But on the other hand, sometimes simple is better. And I think
yes.
that's the mindset that the NHL has to have for next year. And we'll see what they come out with because it's going to be in Toronto. And if it's anything subpar, the NHL is going to hear about it.
Just wait for the Maple Leafs to lose in the first round again. I have to throw that jab in there anytime I can. Oh my God.
Of course.
All right. Yeah. So, welcome everyone to episode 35 of Pucks and Brews. Grab a drink of choice. I have my medium cold brew. Went with the big straw today because I felt like it. Sit back, enjoy, and listen and or watch and listen to some hockey talk. Here we go. So, I mean, let's start off with the news of the day right here, Liam. Vitaly Kravtsov has requested a trade from the New York Rangers. And yeah, I kind of saw this coming because he just wasn't getting any playing time. You can speculate as to why. I just have a personal thing that I just think Drury and Gallant dislike him for some reason. He didn't really do anything to warrant getting continuously healthy scratched, but we are where we are. It's looking like a fresh start is coming, looking like a trade is coming. What are your thoughts on this situation?
My first thoughts are that first impressions are everything. And Vitaly Kravtsov, has he matured, progressively during his time with the Rangers? I think he has. And I think he's much more of a mature player than he was when he first entered the organization. With that said, when he got here, he was entitled. And he believed he should have been in the top six. And I said this during last week's episode, and you said this as well. We both thought that Vitaly Kravtsov should have been a top six player right when he got to the Rangers, but he didn't really have the mentality that he has now to work on your game, put your head down, like the young players like Pavel Buchnevich did. He's now an 80-plus point player in St. Louis, like JT Miller did. He had a 99-point season with the Canucks last year, like Philip Hedl did. Philip Hedl was sent down to the American Hockey League multiple times, including last year, I think, at points, or maybe the year before that. He is now emerging into a superstar. So it just takes time. The way that Gallant has treated him, I don't think is right. I think he should have gotten more opportunities. But you know what? He requested a trade. He wanted out, and I hope he gets his chance elsewhere. But I hope that Chris Drury doesn't undermine his value and get something, not worthwhile in return. If it means not trading him until the offseason to get right value back, then I think you do that. But for right now, it looks like his time with the Rangers could be coming to a close.
Yeah, actually, this first impressions thing is actually a little bit of a weird one because remember when Quinn was still coach at the tail end of the 2020-21 season? And Kravtsov actually came back over from Russia after the KHL playoffs and was inserted into the lineup. And I think he was 20 at the time, was actually playing pretty well for being on a pretty bad team at that point in time.
That's right. He did play pretty well at the time. But again, he didn't want to stick around in a role where his place in the top six or in the starting lineup was really in question. And again, this is a player that's been through a lot ever since he's entered the league. And I think that there are comparable players around the NHL that just need a change of scenery. And I hope that Chris Drury finds a good trade partner for Kravtsov, because he is a talented player. And I think once he gets some muscle under, remember, Pavel Buchnevich was very similar to Vitaly Kravtsov during his first few years with the Rangers. He was a player that was not undersized, but a little bit small, not really well built. He got knocked off the puck easily. He was a player that you knew had raw skill, but he didn't adjust to playing the NHL game well enough. And he's figured it out as he's grown into his body with the St. Louis Blues. And I think the same will happen for Kravtsov. And I said it last week and I'll say it again. I just don't think Kravtsov at this point in his development fits the Rangers timeline. I just don't. I just don't think you can add another forward to a group of Capo Caco, Alexis Lafreniere, multiple Will Cooley, multiple young players that are continuing to develop, and just wait. This is a win now team. The time for the Rangers to win the Stanley Cup is this season. You do not go out and acquire Vladimir Tarasenko and Nico Mikkola if you're not ready to win a Stanley Cup. And the matter of the fact is, Vitaly Kravtsov doesn't help you win a Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah,
in the future, he very well might be.
Yeah, the funny thing in all this is when he actually, going back to the end of the 2020-2021 season, just to clarify, he was 21, not 20. I looked it up. The funny part is he was actually playing noticeably better than Lafreniere and Kako at the time.
but it comes
And
down to where you're selected. You know,
well, I mean
gives you more leeway.
that too,
1 and 2 is not the same as number 9. That you know,
yeah, here's the thing with number nines compared to like first and seconds. First and seconds, you're expecting them to be full-time NHLers right away. So now some years a number 2 overall pick will spend most of a year in the minors, just depending on the quality of the draft class coming out of the draft immediately. It happens. Not every draft class is going to be McDavid and Eichel. But he actually was playing pretty well. That was then again, this was a different state in the Rangers rebuild. But then Drury takes over as GM, Gallant takes over as head coach, and it was probably them. I just think they had a very different view of Kravtsov as a player than Gorton and Quinn did, which is pretty obvious because, he's getting continuously healthy scratched and all the things that have gone down over the past 2 years have gone down. It's in the past now. But whenever he was in the lineup this season, you see there is skill there and there is a potential top 6 forward there.
There is without a doubt a potential top 6 forward there, and there is skill there, but you need to complete the other areas of your game before you can be trusted in a role such as that. And again, I really don't want to speculate too much on why Gerard Gallant, doesn't seem to have a lot of faith in Vitaly Kravtsov. Nobody knows. Nobody knows why. Nobody's at practice except the open practice that the Rangers had a few weeks ago, but nobody's there during the drills, seeing how his skating is, seeing what's good about his game, seeing what's not so good about his game. So it's really all pure speculation. We can both sit here and say that Kravtsov's had a good year. I think statistically he hasn't had a good year, but I think he's proven in leagues, such as the KHL, that this is a talented forward. But if you can't figure it out with Panarin, everybody's able to figure it out with Panarin. There's only 2 players on the Rangers roster that have
except Trocheck apparently.
Trocheck and Kravtsov. That's the 2 players that I was speaking of. But again, I just hope that Chris Drury gets reasonable value back. I saw a rumor on Twitter for a potential trade, including Vitaly Kravtsov, and it almost made me throw up in my mouth. Nick Bukestad and Nick Ritchie for Vitaly Kravtsov. That's Blue Seat Blogs, or I think that's the name of the
wait.
Twitter. And
hold on.
Yeah.
Wait, Kravtsov for Nick Bukestad and Nick Ritchie straight up? I mean, I guess they can do worse, but that's not great.
I want a young player. I don't want Nick Bukestad, who had his best career with Florida and has kind of been middling around with Pittsburgh and now with Arizona. Nick Ritchie, I mean, come on. I mean, I like Ritchie. He's a big-bodied forward. He can play well on that second power play unit, but please, I mean, I think we could do a little bit better. Go for a young player. Again, this is a former 9th overall pick. This is somebody that if you send him to a team that can adequately let him develop, he could be a top line player in the NHL or a consistent top 6 player in the NHL. So Drury's got to be really careful and make sure whoever he acquires in exchange for Vitaly Kravtsov in any trade at this upcoming trade deadline helps the Rangers win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I'm just hoping this doesn't turn out to be one of those post 94 trades where everything worked because they won the cup that year, but long term, all the moves they made, or most of them, just did not work out well for the franchise. But hey, they won. So
would you rather have 15 years of pretty good seasons with no Stanley Cup, or one Stanley Cup and, a little bit of a directionless, kind of franchise for 5-10 years after that? For me, it's a tough question to answer, but we're in this to win the cup.
This is
so if the Rangers win the cup, the Rangers win the cup this year and they have 5 mediocre years after that, I'll look back to the end of the 2023 season and say, you know what? Sucks being a fan right now, but we won the fucking Stanley Cup. So
really hoping that's the case. And just lastly, I was talking about this with my friend Mike the other day, and we kind of both came to a middle ground of Kravtsov getting dealt a bad hand, because whenever he was in the lineup, he was playing with Panarin and Trocheck. And we've clearly seen that that pairing just hasn't worked out so far this season. It doesn't matter who you put on the third as the third player on that line. If those two aren't working together, it kind of just becomes a moot point.
Well, the center drives the play, right? And you know what? Your two wingers are only as good as your centerman is. And I'm not saying
at least
that
the
Vincent
center is
Trocheck,
supposed to drive the play.
right. And I'm not saying that Vincent Trocheck is a bad centerman. I just don't think that he's the right centerman. I would like to see, and we're not going to see this since Vladimir Tarasenko is a Ranger, but I would have liked to see Panarin on the left, Zibanejad in the middle, and Kravtsov on the right. I think they might have put that lineup combo together for one game this season, maybe a handful, or maybe put Hedl in between Kravtsov and Panarin, you know? I would like to see that combination and the combination featuring Mika Zibanejad in lieu of Trocheck, because I agree with you guys. You make good points. You know, if Trocheck and Panarin are not going to work together, Trocheck, Panarin, and Kravtsov are not going to work together. And how can you evaluate Kravtsov's play, based off of a line that has no chemistry?
Exactly.
So it's understandable. And if Kravtsov gets traded to a young team that has a centerman that is able to work really well off the talents that Kravtsov brings to the wing, then again, he can explode and he can blossom into a pretty consistent top six player, but he's not that right now. And the Rangers center depth and the Rangers line combinations and their depth chart, just there's no place for him, because like we just read off last week, it's Panarin, Zibanejad, and Tarasenko, the kid line, and then your third and fourth lines. And however you want to mix that up, if you put Kravtsov on the third and fourth line, how much production are you really going to get out of him? So if you're not playing him with Panarin, what are you doing?
Exactly. I was going to try.
Panarin's playing with Kravtsov. It's stupid.
Yeah. I was trying to look up a stat that someone either sent me or I forgot where I saw this, but it was something along the lines of the amount of goals at 5-on-5 the Rangers have scored when Panarin and Trocheck have been on a line together. It was literally like 6 going into the game against Carolina Saturday night, and Panarin just seemingly had a 4-goal game. So I'm really, really hoping that was a clicking moment for those two. But if that move is a flash in the pan, that's concerning.
You're saying Panarin being put together with
Trocheck.
With Trocheck. Okay.
Yeah. Did I say Zibanejad? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did. It's okay.
Sorry.
No worries. No worries. But then again, I was just a little confused because Panarin was playing with Trocheck. But yeah, I think one game sample isn't really good enough. And you can complain or not complain, or you can be critical rather of Vincent Trocheck's play this season. But let's also talk a little bit about Panarin, right? Because outside of the secondary assist, from a goal scoring,
I found the stat. I found the stat, by the way.
This hasn't been Panarin's best season goal scoring wise. So
No.
I'm happy to see that unlocked. But what's the stat you have?
Funny enough, I actually found it and sent it to somebody, and it was a lot sooner in the text conversation than I thought it was. So here's the tweet from Vince Mercogliano. A line featuring Artemi Panarin and Vincent Trocheck had only produced 6 goals at 5-on-5 since Halloween, a span of 42 games entering Saturday, the game against Carolina. Tonight alone, they generated 4, all 4 coming from Panarin, who, let's face it, Anderson did not have the greatest game.
I was not able to watch that game, but yeah, Anderson did not have the greatest game. Watching the highlights, and I think Panarin beat him glove side,
Yes.
A handful of times. So obviously he had picked a spot on the Carolina netminder. But yeah, again, they had a good game. They haven't had good stretches so far this season. I don't understand, and you can probably give me a little bit more insight. Why wasn't Panarin, Zibanejad, and Tarasenko that line moving forward? Like, why did Gallant break that up? Was that broken up before the game? Was that a mid-game adjustment?
It was a mid-game adjustment.
So where was Tarasenko playing then throughout the entirety of the game?
I know,
Like, was he?
I'm pretty sure Panarin, Zibanejad, and Tarasenko started the game, if I remember correctly, but then Gallant's thing with changing lines. I'm pretty sure Zibanejad stayed with Tarasenko, and I think Kreider got moved back up to that line also, if I remember correctly. If I'm dead wrong, somebody please comment, because I don't really take notes. I just kind of try and take mental notes, and with me trying to remember stuff, no bueno with the way I sleep, no bueno.
Right. Certainly understood.
All right, so just
Um,
to come back to Kravtsov to end this particular portion with a stat. This is the reason why I brought up that Panarin and Trocheck stat. Like with like when you have a 42 game sample size worth of proof. Actually, okay, it technically might be 43. Yeah, entering Saturday. So, including Saturday, it's a span of 43 games. That Panarin and Trocheck together have combined for where at least a line featuring Panarin and Trocheck have combined for 10 goals at 5-on-5 in a 43 game span, and 4 of them came in the game on Saturday night. So we have a large enough sample size to prove where no matter who was on that third line, or excuse me, no matter who was the third wheel, quote unquote, on that line, they were basically just a victim of terrible circumstance.
they were a victim of terrible circumstance. I agree with you.
And it wasn't
And
just Kravtsov.
it was not just Kravtsov, but also to play devil's advocate. With that said, it's not like Kravtsov has clicked with any other line mates he's been with. I mean, can you
And the
sit here
sad
and
part
say
is,
I really?
sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
The sad part is, like, he hasn't been bad either. Like, he hasn't been outright bad.
he has not been outright bad, but I don't think he's been outright great either, and he's not standing off of the page. I just can't sit here right now and say, yeah, I'd love to see Kravtsov with Hedel.
You
I'd
can't
love
break
to
up
see
the kid line.
Kravtsov with Kakko. Can't break up the kid line. Okay, I'd love to see Kravtsov with Trocheck. Okay, he's got a problem with Trocheck. I'd love to see Kravtsov with Zibanejad. Sorry, that's not happening. Kravtsov's not playing on your first line. So where is he playing? If he's not playing with Trocheck and he's not playing with the kid line and he's not playing on the first line, where are you going to put him? You're not
Just to
breaking
be
up that third line. You can't have him on a line with Trocheck. Gallant's not going to put faith in him to put him on the first line. And if you put him on the fourth line, everyone's going to get their panties in a bunch. So what do you do? The only thing you can do is scratch him, unless you want to
so
break up the kid line, what
I
nobody
brought
wants
up
to do.
I brought this up to a friend the other day. At least when Quinn was coach, this is solely referring to Laugh and Kako. At least he was playing them. Like, obviously they would make a mistake and go down to the fourth line. That's just what coaches do with young players most of the time. But he wasn't taking them out of the lineup.
Different point in the New York Rangers history, if you ask me. I mean, the Rangers were a young rebuilding team at that point. And, if they had played up to an inch of their potential, Capo Caco was, a top 6 forward on that team. Alongside Ryan Spooner and Ryan Strome at the time, all these players.
Oh, that's a throwback.
Now the Rangers have an embarrassment of riches
Mm.
at the forward group, especially acquiring Tarasenko. So unless Kravtsov comes out and blows the roof off of the place, I just don't think there's room for him to get consistent minutes. And I'll wrap up the Kravtsov conversation on this. You know what Kravtsov really needs? A trip down to the American Hockey League to play first line minutes. First line minutes.
Here's the
Get him
only
his
reason.
confidence, get him adjusted to the North American game, but he won't do it. And he'll threaten to leave and he'll threaten to go back to Russia and he'll send in his trade request, which he
Well,
already did. And
uh,
that's what his development needs.
here's the thing. He's not waivers exempt. He
So
would
you
have to
can't send him
pass
down.
through waivers, and you know damn well that he's not going to.
But was he waiver exempt in his first 2 years?
Yes, I'm pretty sure he
Like,
was.
could he? So he couldn't have been sent down at all, because I remember in the beginning of the situation, they wanted to send him down.
No, I know 2 years ago he was sent
Yeah, two
down
years ago.
because, well, 2 years ago, excuse me, he was waivers exempt because I'm pretty sure this is going off the top of my head. somebody would have to double. I'm pretty sure. I know for a fact that first year entry level contracts are waivers exempt. Second year, they also might be, but I would have to double check that. But I'm
Well,
just looking because Schneider
yeah.
is on his second year of his ELC and he's waivers exempt. Miller is on the third year of his ELC and he's not waivers exempt. So that might only apply to first year ELC players.
Okay, so first or second year ELC players. But my
Excuse me,
point is
first or
that
second.
right. So if Kravtsov had went down to the American Hockey League without threatening to leave and having his entire big situation at the beginning of his tenure with the Rangers, he would be a top 6 player. He would be a staple in the top 9 right now.
Well,
If
at
he
least
played,
tenure with Drury and Gallant. I feel
yeah,
like that
but
distinction needs to be made.
okay, sure. The distinction needs to be made, but I still think if he had accepted American Hockey League minutes, I really do think he would have a much more solidified role on this team. And the fact that that's what he did in the beginning and he's made the adjustments, and I'll give him credit where it's due, but it's all about how you start, not about how you, well, how you finish now. But okay, whatever. Whichever the way the quote goes. But again, it doesn't matter. And my point is that if Kravtsov was playing on the first line, he'd be a much more complete player. And since he's not a complete player, Gerard Gallant doesn't have the faith to put him in ahead of veterans who have been here before and can subsequently help the Rangers get closer to the playoffs. So it's tough. It really is tough. And I wish him nothing but the best. And I hope that the Rangers they do right by him. They trade him via his request, and they get, as a young player, in a similar situation to Kravtsov, where a change of scenery can help unlock some potential.
All I'm saying is if Jeff Gorton was able to get a second round pick out of Lias Anderson at the time that he did, I'm pretty sure the Rangers can get either a very high second or a late first for Kravtsov, who's shown significantly more than Anderson ever did.
Right. And Kravtsov kind of has shown, if you look at that 2019 draft class, in the first round for the NHL, Kravtsov, even though he hasn't really been, a standout player, let me just read through 1 through 10. Jack Hughes is a star. Capo Caco, slow development. Kirby Doc, extremely slow development. Bowen Byram, still slow development,
But here's
is.
my on Byram. I think he's shown more than a lot of people are gonna realize.
Right. I do like Byram. My point is that at this point, since the draft, Vitaly Kravtsov is this not even the Kravtsov draft? Was Kravtsov 2018?
Yeah.
Oops.
You were
Not
looking at
looking at the right
2019.
draft. But again, the forward group very similar. Philip Zadina, who was drafted 6th, what has he done? Barrett Hayton, what has he done? Oliver Wahlstrom, who the Rangers were criticized for not taking over Kravtsov at the number 9 spot, fell the Islanders at 11. He's been injured, but he hasn't really done a lot. Look at some of these guys. Grigoro Tarasenko, Martin Kaut, Liam Foudy. Like Vitaly Kravtsov has more value than a handful of these players.
Yeah.
My point is, Chris Drury can get value back. And yes, to go off of your point, he can get miles more than the second round pick he got for Lias Anderson, 60th overall, which turned into Will Cooley, which was a good trade. And now Anderson is he even in the Kings system? Is he even with the Ontario Reign?
That's a good question.
He is.
Wow. Now that you brought it up, I'm looking at the 2018 draft right now. Jesus Christ, between 5th overall and 21st overall, that would be Barrett Hayton through Ryan Merkley. Outside of Quinn Hughes and maybe Noah Dobson, that entire portion of the draft is not looking good. And the reason I stopped at 21 was because 22, Keandre Miller.
There you go. And, I hate to go off topic here, Shades, but are you ready for a stat that might piss you off?
I'm
going to read you Lias
actually,
Anderson.
I will be ready in one moment because I just need to bring this up also in terms of just pure drafting to finally conclude the Kravtsov portion. We've actually gone on for a while now. We got a lot more out of this discussion than I thought we would, but Lias Anderson was drafted 7th overall by the Rangers. in 2017. I'm just going to look this up real quick, but I was having a discussion the other day as well with some people about this. In that span of the 2017 draft, it's not looking good for any team that picked any player, because Cody Glass, Lias Anderson, Casey Middlestat, Michael Rasmussen, Owen Tippett, Gabe Vilardi looks actually not bad. Natchez looks really good. Suzuki, mixed feelings. Cal Foote, Brandstrom has been just okay. Valimaki, Liljegren, who's looked okay from what I've heard, Vakanainen, and then you had a run of players starting from Josh Norris at 19. So again, the Rangers were kind of just in a bad spot to be drafting. Happens.
Right, they were. But you know what? Lias Anderson, his potential as a top 6 player might not be gone, because he's got 37 points in 40 games with Ontario. He's got 20 goals in the American Hockey League in 40 games. That's the best numbers Lias Anderson has put up, and it's not particularly close. He had 20 points in 36 games with Hartford in 2018, 2019. So he's figuring it out. And again, the point is not to just say that Lias Anderson, like maybe he's not the bust that we once thought he was, but it takes time for forwards to figure it out. And even though this is what Kravtsov is right now, to make a prediction what he's going to be in 5 years, he could really go in either direction. He could either be a top line winger or he could be a complete bust. And I wouldn't be surprised with either scenario. So,
yeah, it could just be a case of bad draft position. It could be a case of overdrafting because of said draft position. But I hope that Drury, like you said, gets good value, and I really hope he figures it out, because I honestly like the kid as a hockey player.
I'd be interested in calling Arizona and seeing what Barrett Hayton's up to. Talk about 2 players that have kind of
talk about overdrafting. Okay, yeah. Anyway, let's end the conversation on Kravtsov right there. But I actually really we covered a lot of different areas on this. So, all right. Well, now that we've covered that, which was, holy crap, what a discussion. Let's talk about a trade that recently just happened, but more specifically, let's talk about the reaction to the trade that just happened from a Chicago Blackhawk named, Patrick Kane. Yeah, he basically said in an interview that he more or less said he wanted to be traded here, and he was disappointed that he wasn't the one that the Rangers went after. Reading between the lines, that's what he said. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's what he wanted. Obviously, he wanted to be a Ranger. I mean, who doesn't want to play with Artemi Panarin? I mean, they had so much success together during the early years with Chicago. And of course, Kane wants to win a Stanley Cup as well. And look, I don't think Kane's mind is fully made up yet as to whether he wants to leave Chicago or not. And I think that decision is entirely up to him. I think Chicago is going to do right by the player. And I think that's good for an organization that really needs a little bit of a better PR look after what they've, done over the last few years, and let's just say decade as a whole, since their string of success. So for Patrick Kane, again, he gets to choose where he wants. He can definitely put in a list of teams, to Chicago, and put his preferences up towards the top. And I think before the Tarasenko trade, I would be hard pressed to say that the Rangers weren't number 1 on that list. But again, there's issues with his hip. Kane says that he has no issues with his hip injury, but obviously Chris Drury and the Rangers saw it a different way, and they got their top line winger in Tarasenko. So now we can move on, and wherever Patrick Kane goes, I wish him nothing but success. But the Rangers won't be that place.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the hip injury that he brought up, he said it was bothering him more last year. Meanwhile, considering where the Blackhawks were last year, he had a very good season, points-wise. So,
but this year it's been the complete opposite. And the Athletic just released their scoring cards or player cards at this point in the year, and his value is league minimum, and that's a player making $10.5 million. And it came out, Emily Kaplan came out with a report that said Chris Drury and the Rangers were not a fan of the high asking price in regard to Patrick Kane. And I'm sorry, regardless of the pedigree that he has and the Stanley Cups that he has, when you have a player that may or may not have a significant hip issue, a player that's having the worst statistical season of his career, and a player who has a market value of league minimum, and making $10.5 million and a high asking price on top of that, yeah, no thanks. And the fact that Kane made his comments, it really doesn't matter. He's going to be on a different team. He's going to stay with the Blackhawks, and it's going to be what it's going to be. Tarasenko is a Ranger, and Chris Drury and the whole organization can move on. And that's just it. And I know Panarin's very happy to be playing with Tarasenko. It's not like Panarin is upset that he's not being able to play with his best friend, Patrick Kane. No, it's the other way around. Kane is really, really upset that he's not able to play with Panarin because he knows that he has to rebuild his own value before he becomes an unrestricted free agent. And his value is extremely low. How much would you pay Patrick Kane right now as an unrestricted free agent after the year he had? I wouldn't pay him anywhere close to $10.5 million. You know how he rebuilds that value playing next to one of the best players in the world, Artemi Panarin. And now he's on Chicago playing next to who's his first line winger and first line center? I can't even tell you. That's how bad they are.
Yeah, pretty much. The Blackhawks are very bad. It's
and
terrible.
Jonathan Toews was not at practice today either. So something to keep an eye on.
Something to keep an eye on indeed. So let's talk about another trade that is going to happen, but hasn't happened yet. Jakob Chychrun with the Coyotes. This is a whole thing within itself. I mean, because he knows he's getting traded. He got healthy scratch the other night for trade-related reasons. At first, it was Brandt Clarke of Carolina going the other way, or was it LA? I don't remember.
It's LA.
It is LA. Yeah. And then I saw another tweet saying Brandt Clarke has been informed he won't be traded. That hasn't stopped the player from being traded before. That happened with JT Miller and the Rangers. Just saying, just because a player's been told they're not getting traded doesn't mean that they're not getting traded. It could very well still happen. But yeah, this has been a player that has been on the trade block for a while, and now it finally looks like the trigger is about to be pulled on a trade.
Yeah, it does. And, I like the fit in LA, to be honest with you. The Kings are one of those teams that could really use a number one defenseman. And alongside Drew Doughty, I feel like Jakob Chychrun could very well be the future of that blue line in LA. And I think it's also very interesting to see the team that they're talking to about this potential trade, that being the Arizona Coyotes. What about Karel Vejmelka as well? The LA Kings, more than they need a defenseman, they need a goaltender too. So I think it could be a little bit of a 2-for-1 package where they get a top 4 D-man and they get a starting goaltender. And you know what? I would have some interest in Karel Vejmelka, in a Jakob Chychrun trade if I'm Rob Blake of the Los Angeles Kings. And if it means up giving Brandt Clarke, that's something I do. I think Clarke is a really, really solid prospect. I mean, hey, he put up eight points in 7 games in the World Juniors playing with Canada. And with the Barrie Colts, he's got 10 goals, 16 assists, 26 points in 15 games. He's an offensive defenseman. He's somebody, with a lot of draft stock when he was selected. And I think it would be a really nice piece for Arizona moving forward. But I think, LA's got to be willing to move the necessary prospects to make the deal done. And it looks like they got a little bit gun shy once this trade got towards the finish line.
Yeah, Vejmelka is actually not a bad goalie. He's actually a pretty decent goalie. I mean, his career save percentage is .901, but look at the team in front of him. Yeah, look at the team. No, he's been a pretty decent goalie, especially this season, considering where they were at. So much so that I almost drafted him in fantasy. So I don't just give a blind thought of drafting an Arizona goalie in fantasy. The guy's got to be halfway decent. But besides the fact, he's pretty good, and I could definitely see LA trying to go after him in a trade as well.
Right. And, of course, don't want to speculate as to what other teams could be interested in Jakob Chychrun, but I think, any team in playoff position that has the cap flexibility to make that move happen would be. And for LA, it's kind of, do you want to push the envelope or not? It's much like the Rangers, a young team that doesn't have necessarily a lot of playoff experience. You have 2 goaltenders in Cal Peterson and Phoenix Copley and Jonathan Quick for that matter as well. But yeah, I think at this point, Jonathan Quick just might be a little bit over the hill, to be honest with you. Again, he's one of the greatest American goaltenders of all time. He's a surefire Hockey Hall of Famer. But at this point, the Kings are kind of ready to take that next step out of their rebuild. And I think a new goaltender is really going to help that, because now they're working for a three-man tandem of Cal Peterson, who once had success with LA, but he's been one of the worst goaltenders, if not the worst goaltender in the entire National Hockey League statistically this season. Phoenix Copley, who has performed admirably, coming in and helping out. But again, he's not an NHL caliber goaltender. The last time he was in the NHL was with the Washington Capitals, serving as the backup to Braden Holtby. And even since then, a majority of his starts have been in Hershey in the American Hockey League. So I'm just not entirely sure if this three-man group is going to lead the Kings in a Western Conference where they have a shot. They have a chance. If they add a Jakob Chychrun and they can add a Karel Vejmelka, I wouldn't take it off the table of the Kings having a nice run. And, we know how many times the LA Kings have squeaked themselves into the playoffs with a team not really a lot of expectations under them, and they have gone and won the Stanley Cup, of course, 2014 and 2012. So, yeah, I think it's a move that they should make. Brandt Clarke is a really good prospect, but regardless of whether Chychrun becomes a King or not following the trade deadline, a new goaltender is a necessity. So I hope that's something they address.
Yeah, this is going to be something very much to keep an eye on. And knowing our luck, it will happen probably 5 minutes after we stop recording.
Hey, that would be pretty cool, right? Because we're predicting it right now. Like no trade has been announced, and if Karel Vejmelka somehow gets attached to Jakob Chychrun in a trade for picks and prospects to the LA Kings, we look like geniuses. But then of course you'll have people who said, oh, you definitely recorded right after the trade, and
we didn't.
We didn't. This is being recorded at 3:10 Eastern time on February 13th. So if Vejmelka gets traded to the Kings at 3:45, we had it first.
Yeah. And if anybody does say that, oh, you recorded after, it's like, if we recorded after, we'd be talking about the trade that happened, not what happened beforehand.
Precisely.
So
yes.
Yeah. So on to another potential trade. You brought up to me before we started recording that Erik Karlsson might be Edmonton bound. That would be interesting. Just the visual alone of watching Karlsson play with McDavid. The question is, can they make it work based on Karlsson's cap hit?
Yeah, it all comes down to the money shades. And right now, Erik Karlsson is making $11.5 million. So there would need to be some money being sent back the other way and some salary retention. But at this point, it was reported by TSN Edge that the Oilers and Sharks have re-sparked trade discussions about Erik Karlsson. And, I think it leads into a bigger conversation that I'll ask you at the end of what I'm talking about here. But again, the Sharks and the Oilers, the Sharks are motivated to get this done. The Sharks are a rebuilding team. They don't want to have an $11.5 million player on their books, even a player that, say what you want defensively, is probably the front runner for the Vezina Trophy right now, has a potential to put up north of 100 points as a defenseman. I think they have to get him off the books, and I think the Oilers should be interested. But again, significant cap has to be moved. Maybe Jesse Puljujarvi, maybe Tyson Barrie sent back to make the money work. Again, I really don't know. But if Edmonton can pull it off, and Shades, this is my question to you. If Erik Karlsson is an Edmonton Oiler, where do they stand? With Jack Campbell, being, returning to his old form, Stuart Skinner, a solid 1B, add Karlsson to that back end with McDavid. Do they become the front runners in the West?
Maybe, because we all know specifically how bad the Pacific Division is. I think if they do get Karlsson, I think that would automatically get them past the first round, possibly into the conference final again, just based on how bad the West is.
Right.
And here's the thing to note. Currently, as we speak, the Oilers have 10.2 million on injured reserve on LTIR at the moment. So this trade isn't out of the question. And Barrie could possibly be going the other way, because let's just say it was a straight up hypothetical Tyson Barrie for Erik Karlsson trade with Karlsson being retained at 50%, which would be, is it 10 and a half?
11 and a half he's making.
11 and a half. So that would be 5.75 as opposed to Tyson Barrie's 4.5.
And you know what? If you
They
can
would have to
package
trade, they
yeah.
would have to get one more contract off the books from how it looks.
And I know exactly who it would be. Jesse Puljujarvi, who makes $3 million. And if you move Barry's 4.5 and Puljujarvi's 3, that's $7.5 million going back the other way. And without salary retention, that's Edmonton only taking on an extra $4 million for a player who's about to have 100 points as a defenseman. That's a trade you make. But if Barrie and Puljujarvi go back the other way, the amount of picks and prospects going to San Jose has just been upped by quite a bit. Yes. I think the trade would have to include Evan Bouchard, perhaps the best defensive prospect that Edmonton has, and, you know, a first round pick, you know, a conditional second round pick that could turn into a first round pick, but they have the assets to make the money work here. And if you're Edmonton, this is a slam dunk. I know everyone in the comments of Chris Johnston's original tweet from 2 days ago were saying, really, another offensive defenseman heading towards Edmonton? Look, you know, if you put Erik Karlsson on the Oilers with the way he's playing this year, if their goaltending stands up, and if Connor McDavid can
continue to be Connor McDavid.
Yes, precisely. Then, you know, they could come out of the West, because Shades, I look at the Western Conference right now, just as a whole, it is straight up weak. It is a straight up weak conference. And that's why, you know, just to put this into the bigger picture here, I like teams like LA going for it, because there is an opportunity here. There is no juggernaut right at the top of the conference. You know, there is no Boston, there is no Tampa Bay, there is no Rangers, Carolina, Toronto. You know, who's at the top of the Western Conference right now? Is it the Vegas
Dallas.
Golden Knights are at the top, or Dallas are at the, you know, do you trust Dallas as a number one seed as much as you trust Boston or the Rangers or Toronto or Tampa Bay? I mean, man, the conferences are so lopsided. So if you're a team in playoff position, you go for it. That's why I want Seattle to go for it too, you know? So that's why Vegas needs a top line player. I won't be surprised if they call Chicago asking about Patrick Kane, you know? So I could see significant shakeup in this conference from multiple teams after the deadline.
Yeah. Hypothetically speaking, if this trade happens, watch out. Because, like I said, McDavid and Karlsson on the ice together, especially on a power play, that's dangerous. That's straight up dangerous.
And everybody was getting so excited in Edmonton when Tyson Barrie was being added to this power play unit, playing with McDavid, you know, because at the time, Tyson Barrie was a well above average offensive defenseman on a Colorado Avalanche team that, you know, had a decision to make. And of course, now he's with Edmonton. So yeah, I think he'll put up a ton of points. And I think if you have a power play unit featuring Draisaitl, McDavid, and Erik Karlsson, oh wow. That's, you know, special teams mean a lot in the playoffs. It's harder to score goals. And when you have power plays and you have 3 players on the ice who can strike at any time in many different areas, that's a move I'd be seriously interested in making if I'm Ken Holland of
a la the Rangers of last year.
Exactly right. And that's why it's so frustrating to watch the Rangers on the power play this year, because we just know how much potential there is in that group of forwards. So
yeah, but if this trade happens, Edmonton's chances of getting out of the West, in my opinion, just shot up. Didn't go up slightly, just shot up.
I think they'd win the Pacific, because right now there's only a 3-point difference between third and first place. Seattle and Edmonton are tied at 65 points, and Vegas is at 68 points. Mark Stone had back surgery.
Yeah, Vegas is low-key falling off a cliff.
High key falling off a cliff. 32-18-4 at this point. They're only, you know, 10 games over NHL 500. And again, they don't have their star player. There is an opening in this Western Conference right now. And, you know, the Central Division, you know, and you can share your thoughts on this too, they just don't spark a lot of danger into me. You know, Dallas, you know, I still view as, again, an above average team, but not a contender to win the Stanley Cup. Colorado, you always have to be concerned about, of course. They have 2 less games than second place Winnipeg, 3 less games than first place Dallas. So again, we'll see. But there are openings here in this conference, and Edmonton should strike, because one way or another, San Jose is going to get rid of Erik Karlsson at the deadline, because he's had that good of a season. So good of a season that the fact that he's making $11.5 million is something that other teams are willing to work with. Obviously money has to be sent back, and, they have to make things work. But that $11.5 million price tag, which once scared every single team away, not so scary anymore. And Erik Karlsson, might I also add, just to finish this off, he's kind of ruining San Jose's chances at Connor Bedard. So I think they want to get him gone as soon as possible, to where the team starts losing in regulation again and not getting a lot of production out of their back end, so they can have a generational talent. So I think as much as there's pressure on teams in the Western Conference to acquire Erik Karlsson, there's also pressure on San Jose to move him.
So to end this discussion, does he in fact get traded to Edmonton? Yes or no?
Sitting here today on February 13th, yes. I think after the deadline, I think that Erik Karlsson is an Edmonton Oiler, because I think Edmonton is one of the few teams who are desperate enough to get it done, and they see what they could potentially put on the ice with 3 of, if not the most, 3 dangerous, 2 forward and 1 defenseman combination in the league in Draisaitl, McDavid, and Karlsson. I think it's just too fascinating of an idea for a team in a conference that's weak to not pull the trigger on. Now, I don't know if it's going to be Evan Bouchard. I don't know what the prospects are going to look like, but I think if they can make the money work and it comes down to just giving up the assets and taking on the player, I think he'll be an Edmonton Oiler. But what say you?
I'm going to go with yes, because I think Ken Holland is desperate enough to actually do this, because let's face it, that's not a great built. It's not a very well built roster. Let's be honest. So I think he's desperate enough to pull the trigger.
And I think it's clear and evident that over the last few years, Edmonton in the playoffs, that just the roster built as it is just, it's not going to win you a Stanley Cup, and you're in playoff position. That's great. But if the playoffs started today and it was Edmonton with the roster they have against the Seattle Kraken, I think the Kraken would give Edmonton trouble. I'm not saying the Kraken would beat them, but I think that Seattle, would not make it easy. And I think you need a player to push your team over the hump. And specifically for the Oilers, they need somebody on the back end. And there's no other player available at the deadline who can make as much of an impact as EK65.
Yep. It's going to be very interesting to see this trade deadline, because he's with Horvat and Tarasenko traded. Karlsson all of a sudden becomes the biggest fish in the trade market.
Is he a bigger fish than Timo Meier?
Well, at least for defensemen. At least
okay,
for defensemen.
Yeah. For defensemen, sure. Right.
Yeah. Definitely. Although that is a very good question, but that is a question for another day. Another day. So let's transition to the Eastern Conference, more specifically the Metro Division. And I'm so glad you brought up Timo Meier, because
I was about to say it's not a question for another day, because we're about to talk about Timo Meier. So it's a question for today.
Well, I mean, technically it's more of a question about the New Jersey Devils. And the question does become, do they become the next team, more specifically in the Metropolitan Division, to get one of the biggest fishes on the free agent market in Timo Meier? Because the Islanders traded for Bo Horvat, and then a couple days later, our beloved New York Rangers traded for Vladimir Tarasenko. The question becomes, do the Devils trade for Timo Meier?
It would be the tri-state trifecta if they were able to pull that off. And, look, the New Jersey Devils are looking at the New York Islanders and the New York Rangers and the moves they've made over the last couple of weeks. They're cognizant of that. They know that. And Timo Meier, I don't think Timo Meier has been, and you correct me if you think differently, but I don't think Timo Meier up to this point has been connected to any other team more than he's been connected to the New Jersey Devils. So it's just a match made in heaven. And I think that the Devils need to give up the assets to make this happen, because if they don't, they are going to be heavily outclassed by whoever they face in the playoffs, whether that's in the Metropolitan Division or in the Atlantic if they're able to win the division. So I think it's a move that they have to make. But let me just put this out there, Shades, and I'm not sure if you know this, but the Devils came out today and they made Timo Meier untouchable, and they made Luke Hughes untouchable. Now, Luke Hughes, I understand, right? Because he's Jack Hughes' brother, of course.
Well, that and
All the
plus
media attention when
those
he was
two
drafted.
that and plus those two guys are second and fourth overall picks respectively, if I remember correctly.
Yes, but again, Timo Meier, he would probably come with an extension. And I think
Hmm.
Timo Meier is going to cost a lot. And I see a lot of Devils fans around Twitter kind of going around and saying, oh, we'll give them Alexander Holtz and first round pick and Damon Severson and that. That's not going to work. You're going to have to give up one of your top prospects for this player, because Shades, there has not been many wingers in the NHL who has been as productive in all three zones as Timo Meier has. So let's not sit here and say that the price tag is going to be low. The Sharks are going to be looking for a lot, and especially if this trade comes after they move Erik Karlsson, they want your best prospect. And guess what? If San Jose calls New Jersey and Timo Meier is off the table, then fuck you. I'm going and trading Timo Meier somewhere else. That's what I would say if I'm San Jose. Seriously, I don't really care where their draft stock is. The Devils are having their first good year in quite a while, and they have a chance to acquire and subsequently re-sign one of the best young forwards in the NHL. You're giving up assets. So I don't know what fantasy land these Devils fans are living in where they think they're going to give up Holtz in a first round pick and get the player. I don't see it.
And I have a prediction that Meier is going to get more than Tarasenko did in a trade return, because he's an RFA with arbitration rights. Tarasenko's an expiring UFA who was 100% going to hit the UFA market had he not been traded. So I can 100% see Meier getting more back in a trade.
I think that Timo Meier is going to get the most value of any player traded at this deadline than anybody. There's no player who's going to bring back a bigger return. I really think so.
Do you think it's going to be similar or more than the Bo Horvat trade?
More. I really do. I think Ratu was, again, somebody who had good draft stock. Again, he was projected, like we mentioned last episode or a couple episodes ago, to be a number one overall pick at one point. Of course, he falls to the second round. I just don't think the prospects are the same. Anthony Beauvillier is somebody who, the Islanders really tried to be patient with, and it just didn't work out in the long run. And again, Bo Horvat is a UFA. So like Tarasenko's a UFA, Horvat's a UFA. So I don't really think you can, compare the two when it comes to Timo Meier. But I will say this, whoever does acquire Timo Meier, I think like 20 minutes after that trade is finalized, he'll be extended to. So you're not trading for a player that, unless it was the Rangers who are in an obvious cap crunch and can't add a $10.5 million player for years on end, then it would have been different. But the Devils are a young team. The Devils cap isn't really, loaded like the Rangers is at this point. If they add Timo Meier, I guarantee you they are going to extend him within a reasonable price range. And if that is the case, if the trade comes with an extension, the Devils are giving up a lot for the player.
Yeah, Devils, they would definitely have to send a contract back the other way, because they currently have 14 forwards and 7 defensemen going against the salary cap. But it's definitely doable.
It's definitely doable. And if you look at Timo Meier on the year, he's got 51 points in 54 games. He's almost a point per game player. He's got 315 career points in 448 games. Again, he's been really good. He's got 13 power play goals. He's got 18 power play points. He just completely just makes the Devils a different team. I look at the Devils right now as a first round exit. If Timo Meier becomes a Devil and it's just prospects going back, meaning not players that are making an impact on the team currently, I hate to say this, but sitting here as a Rangers fan, if we faced off in the playoffs, I'd be concerned. I really would.
I would be too, because I look at it as, comparing to last year, at least, that this Devils team right now is more fear-inducing than the Penguins were at any point last season.
Agreed.
And I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think that's just a straight up fact.
It is a straight up fact. And the Penguins gave us a lot of trouble.
That
We were
was
one
mostly
Louis
because the Rangers this just didn't
Domingue,
really gel the way that they should have, or gelled the way that they should
right?
have.
And I just don't think that the Devils are a good matchup for us. I just don't. The Devils play with a ton of speed, and they got good goaltending in Vitek Vanacek. Jack Hughes is a problem, and Jack Hughes and Timo Meier would be a bigger problem.
Yeah.
So I hope it's a trade that's not made, but for the Devils, there's an opportunity here for them to get significantly better and make the playoffs and go further than they've gone at any point since they last made the Stanley Cup in 2012. So with this
Which
player.
they beat us, ironically.
Yes. Well, hopefully it won't be hopefully it'll be a first round matchup if the two teams play together. But I will say this, it'll be an entertaining series.
Oh, absolutely. The
know.
Devils are a fast young team. I would love to see that. Would love to see that matchup just as a fan.
I would be frustrated. Yeah, I'll be frustrated at the all end if the Rangers lost, but I'd
Yeah.
be entertained for sure.
You and me both. No, that's a play. Like Rangers Devils would be a playoff series where, as a general hockey fan, that would probably be either my first or second go-to series of the first round this year, if that ends up being the matchup. But as a Rangers fan, I would be excited, but at the same time, I would be a little more worried than I was last year.
Right. And again, I was not really worried last year going into round one against the Penguins, to
I
be
wasn't
honest.
either, but I
And
became worried.
oh yeah, I became very worried. I mean, I was even at game one, and after we lost in triple overtime, I was walking down the MSG steps. I still wasn't worried. I was like, don't worry, we'll bounce back. And then of course, right, we won game two, and then we lost both games on the road. When we lost game three on the road, I was like, oh boy. And then we lost game four, and I was like,
Oh boy.
and then we fell behind early in game five. And if it wasn't for who scored, was it Trouba, Lafreniere, and Hedel, I think,
I don't
in
even
game five.
remember.
But again, it was looking really bad there, for a few days. And the Devils would worry me prior to the series more than the Penguins did. So
Yeah, but moral of this portion or this section of the podcast, if the Devils end up with Meier, they automatically become a big problem, not just a problem.
mm-hmm.
And like I said, as a Rangers fan, they would scare me a little bit, but as a general hockey fan, I would look at that team and go, that team can possibly do some damage.
The Devils honestly scare me more, with Timo Meier. And I'll wrap it up on this. Timo Meier, the Devils with Timo Meier scares me more than the Bruins do. Even with 83 points, they scare me more than the Maple Leafs do. They don't scare me more than Tampa Bay, obviously, because Tampa Bay is Tampa Bay.
Obvious reasons.
But I would rather face Carolina than face New Jersey. I would rather face Washington. That goes without saying. Pittsburgh, Florida, Buffalo, the Islanders, so there's only, one matchup I like that I would rather not have ahead of the Devils, and that's Tampa Bay. So, New Jersey's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And if they go a couple rounds in the playoffs and make a semi-deep run, I won't be surprised.
No, I wouldn't be surprised either, especially after the way the Devils got off to that hot start to the season, which kind of just blew everyone away.
Right. And they've, I'm not going to say they've been mediocre since then, but they haven't been as dominant, since the start of the year. And it comes to the point where they necessitate, in addition to that top six. And yeah.
But hey, come playoff time, this could be a very scary team when/if they acquire Timo Meier. And if he doesn't get traded to the Devils, does he stay in San Jose? Because he is an RFA.
I actually, normally I would say no way, but I actually think that there is an outside chance that Timo Meier could remain a San Jose Shark. There's a good relationship between team and player. It's not like that the relationship is broken and this is a player that needs to get out of town. This is a young, talented forward that spent his entire career with the Sharks in San Jose. And sure, his chances to win aren't great, but who's to say the Sharks don't win the draft lottery after trading Karlsson and put Connor Bedard with Timo Meier? And suddenly you really have something to work with moving forward. So things can change. But right now, I think the team with the most to offer San Jose for this player are the New Jersey Devils.
Yep. And just to finally wrap this up, Timo Meier and Erik Karlsson all of a sudden have become the most sought out forward and defenseman, respectively, this trade deadline. That's another thing to keep an eye on.
And that's shocking because, if you would have told me before the season that Erik Karlsson would have more value at the deadline or be more sought after at the deadline than Jakob Chychrun was, I would be like, whoa.
That's a hot take, all right.
Or even if you told me that, Timo Meier would be more valuable of an asset at the trade deadline than Patty Kane would be. That would have been a hot take at the beginning of the year. So many things can change, and we've seen that this season.
As they say in wrestling, let's let it play out because things are about to get interesting.
I can't wait for the post-trade deadline episode of Pucks and Brews. That's going to be a fun one.
You and me both. So let's transition finally to the New York Rangers. Let's get this one out of the way first. First impressions on Vladimir Tarasenko.
Again, I wasn't able to watch either game. To be honest with you, was knee deep in work. But obviously, my dad texted me that Tarasenko scored like nearly, what was it? A minute and a half in, 3 minutes in,
less than 2 minutes,
less than 2 minutes in,
or less than 3 minutes. Definitely, it might have been less than 2.
I was calling the Gladiators game remotely, and I was in a commercial break, and I texted my dad. I was like, "No fucking way." He scored, and it was just good to see the Panarin and Tarasenko combination come to fruition. And then against Carolina, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit concerned that I saw he only got 13 minutes of ice time. I was very concerned that he was, to hear from you that he was taken off of that line with Zibanejad and Panarin. I think it just bothers me so much about Gerard Gallant. You just need to just let it play out, as they say.
This is one of those things where. Yeah, this is one of those few times where Gallant changing the lines worked miracles, and it was really only one line that scored after he's changed the lines. So it's a little 50-50 of good move, move, because the other 3 lines didn't score. But I'm gonna kind of half throw out the game against Carolina because Tarasenko literally had just got traded like 2 days before, had to make the trip. He's playing a back-to-back. I'm going to kind of throw that one out, but I'm going to, like I said in an earlier episode about something else, I'm going to keep that what happened on Saturday night in the back of my head just in case, because Gallant's tendencies with the line changes and everything.
Right, and I'm going to be very interested to see the next time that the Rangers practice. Next game they have is Wednesday at 10 o'clock against Vancouver.
They better play better than they did last time against Vancouver.
Yes, because that's not going to be good enough in Vancouver.
And I was not able to watch that game, but I heard.
Well, Vancouver's gelling well, right? Anthony Beauvillier, is coming in, and again, they're a team that's not going to make the playoffs this year, but they, they still got some fire under them. But my point is, it's going to be very interesting to see at practice prior to the game against Vancouver Wednesday what the lines are looking like.
Yes,
because if what Gallant had put together in Carolina remains the same, then I'll have some questions.
Yeah, and just to end this on Tarasenko again, bless you. Just end this on Tarasenko again. He looked decent in his first game. He didn't look like completely dominant because I honestly wasn't expecting him to, because he's getting traded to a new team. He's got to learn the system a little bit, getting new line mates, got to get acclimated. But I thought he looked all right.
Yeah, all things considered, from what I heard, and watching the highlights afterwards, of course, he scored the goal, kind of disappeared a little bit after that. I'm not sure if you agree with me or not, but yeah, you got to get adjusted. But you get adjusted to the new systems and the lineup as well, and your teammates too. And that's why I just think it was so key. And of course, Gallant's got to do what's best for the team. But I just think for right now, it's so key keeping Tarasenko with Panarin just to make sure his comfortability is there, because this is a new group, and the only player that he's familiar with or is friends with is Artemi. But again, we'll see as the games go along here. But I'm happy to see that he scored in his first game, and I'm with you in throwing that game against Carolina out the window and see how he does after multiple days of rest.
Yeah. But Vladimir Tarasenko's a Ranger, and we're still very happy.
Right. And what did you think, real quick? What did you think of Nico Mikkola?
First game rough, second game better.
Okay.
to keep it short. But first game was pretty rough.
I'll keep an eye on him on Wednesday and see how he does.
Yeah, I mean, both you and me both are going to have to do that. So speaking of impressions, first impressions with Jaroslav Halak this season were frankly not good. Second impressions, though, guy's turned it around and has been playing really freaking well. And it's turned into a very good signing so far.
Yeah, and I was talking to you before the podcast shades that the move was heavily criticized by many Rangers fans at the time during the summer when Chris Drury made this signing. And of course, it was coming off a season where he had a questionable trade, involving Sammy Blais for Pavel Buchnevich. A lot of Ranger fans were kind of questioning what kind of GM Chris Drury was going to be. He brought in Halak and including you and including myself too. And you know what? I'm not going to lie to you. When Halak was signed to the 2-year deal, I was shaking my head. I'm like, why would you give this guy term? He's coming off of the worst season of his career. Again, much like Jonathan Quick, maybe a little bit over the hill. If you look what he put up, wow, he was actually pretty good. He 2.94 goals against average in 17 games with Vancouver. Again, small sample size, but he's had a goals against average sub 3 since 2018, 2019. So again, small sample sizes, but Jaroslav Halak's been a good goaltender for a long time. And I think the tandem with him and Igor Shesterkin's worked out really well. And Shades, I'll wrap it up with this. I don't think that you could ask for anything better than a 2.62 goals against average and a 907 save percentage. That's exactly what I want out of my backup. Maybe save percentage a little bit higher. But again, that goals against average is spectacular.
Yeah. Cam Talbot and Antti Ranta just set an incredible precedent for Rangers backup goalies that I don't know if anybody is going to live up to those standards moving forward.
Right. And you know what? I think a lot of it a lot of the credit belongs to Benoit Allaire. He's the best goaltending coach in the league. Him and Mitch Korn. Mitch Korn's over in New York with the Islanders. And I think it's no question that the Rangers and the Islanders have two of the best tandems in the league. And their goalie coaches are a big part of that. I mean, Benoit Allaire has brought, the goals against average for Jaroslav Halak from last year to this year from 2.94 to 2.62. It's really good. Really solid. Nice turnaround for this player. And I'm sure it's doing wonders for Igor Shesterkin as well. Not having his best season, but to have a veteran back there when you are going through struggles who's been there before and understand what it's like to be a young goaltender and, and go through your ups and downs. It's key for the Rangers star netminder as well.
Yeah. And Halak will be a UFA at the end of this season. That's going to be another interesting thing to keep an eye on come the offseason.
I thought it was a 2-year deal, but it must have just been a 1-year deal. Yeah. Again, something to keep an eye on. But again, I think, no matter who the Rangers bring in, the Rangers brought in Andre Pavlich,
Dude, he had a decent year that year, Pavlich.
It's all Benoit Allaire. When's the last backup goaltender that had a subpar year? And please don't say Alexander Georgiev. Please don't.
Well, not last year, the year before was not great.
I just think overall, Benoit Allaire gets the most out of his goaltenders, and we've seen that from any backup the Rangers bring in. So my point is, even though Halak's only got this year on his deal, no matter who the next veteran is, I have no worry that they're going to perform admirably behind Igor.
Yeah, but hey, guy's been good, and he's being exactly what we needed him to be. Because if he wasn't, could be a problem right now. But thankfully, it's not.
Yeah, thankfully it's not. And wow, I just want to put this out there. I know I'm kind of going off topic, and I promise I'll leave it here. But Alexander Georgiev, 917 save percentage, 2.68 goals against average this year with Colorado. Good on you, sir. Good on you for, the critics, were
well, really I mean, I also think that Colorado has a better team this year than the Rangers did last year, even with all the injuries.
Disagree, but yeah, I think it was very similar defenses that they're playing in front of. I don't think that it's, one is marginally better than the other, but again, you can't, 917 save percentage. That tells you all the story you need to know, but just saying, good for a former Ranger. And I'm happy for him that he's in Colorado having success.
Yeah. So. No, I mean, I've brought this up to you so many times. I was not a fan of the way the team played last year, but that's a whole other tangent.
we did not. Again, it goes further than the personnel.
Oh
You're
yeah,
right. And it comes
absolutely.
down to how you're playing. And I was just going off of the personnel and the way the Rangers played defensively last year. Horrible. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, but that's a whole other rabbit hole that we've basically delved into at many points throughout the course of the season.
Certainly.
So I actually made a separate note in our show rundown about I was gonna make a whole thing about Panarin's 4-goal game, but I mean I kind of tied that in earlier. So I'm gonna transition to some stats. And I brought this up to you earlier. First and foremost, I just have to say that me and my friend buying popcorn at the Rangers Blues game back in, was it December or January? It was in December. Jesus Christ, December 5th. Holy crap. I didn't realize it was that long ago. Anyway, so me and my friend bought popcorn at MSG, the popcorn bucket, during the Rangers Blues game on December 5th, 2022. All I'm gonna say is Rangers won that night. That started a 7-game win streak. And ever since that game, the Rangers record is, just let me pull up the stat real quick. The Rangers record is 19-4-3. The last 26 games, excluding the game against Carolina, because I'm talking solely about the first 52. The latter 26, they were 19-4-3, to repeat. The first 26 games of the season, they were 11-10-5. And frankly, playing worse than they were. Here's some stats. Yeah, so the first 26 games of last year, the goals per game of this season were 2.92 compared to the latter 26 of 3.61. First 26 games, goals against of 2.88. Last 26, 2.38. Power play percentage, 20.5 to 24.3. And penalty kill percentage, 80 to 82.4. Definitely a noticeably better in like game in and game out. Has the goaltending quality also gotten better from the start of the season? Yes, but that wasn't the only problem, clearly. But yeah, so basically back to the popcorn thing. The Rangers can thank me and my boy Dan for buying popcorn because that changed the entire season. Fuck Trouba throwing his helmet. I'm taking full on credit for this.
You know what? Yeah, I've said it in past episodes. You and your buddy went to go see the Rangers and spent money on the team at a time where not many fans really wanted to spend money on the team.
Actually,
That game
funny
against
enough,
St.
I got
Louis,
those tickets for free.
even better. But but yeah, even if you didn't pay for them, you still went out to support the team. And while you were buying popcorn, that could be the game-changing moment of this season. And yeah, like you said, fuck Trouba throwing his helmet. It's all you just standing there in that popcorn line with your spending probably $17 on a bucket of popcorn or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy that not just MSG, it's just everywhere. I mean, I spent $8 on a Diet Coke, a 16-ounce Diet Coke at an ECHL game in
Dear
Savannah.
Lord.
$8. And I worked for the team. I was an intern with the team. And you can't even.
Jeez.
Oh.
Yeah, prices are ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, that was literally the turning point of the season. Like, all joking aside, that was the turning point of the season.
And how ironic is it that game was against the St. Louis Blues, and now we acquire perhaps the Blues' best player, or one of them, in Vladimir Tarasenko, and he's going to be the player that hopefully pushes us over the finish line. So,
yeah, I hope so, man. I hope so. But yeah, this team is looking much better from the start of the season, and that's fantastic to see.
Yeah, it really is great to see. And, look, every team's going to go through ebbs and flows throughout the year. And I think Trouba, as, inadequate or not inadequate, just as underwhelming as his play had been at the beginning of the year and kind of throughout the entire season,
Honestly, he hasn't really been great since that either.
He hasn't been great. He hasn't been great all year, but because he's throwing huge hits and hey, I give him credit. He's throwing huge hits. He forced Calgary into two penalties, what was it? Two instigator penalties
I
or a
think
roughing
so.
penalty, on two huge hits, one on Kadri. And I don't remember who the other one was on, but still, Trouba is not playing his best defensive hockey, but he's doing the things that a leader should do. And I think that we should give him credit for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not gonna say this is a hot take because I don't think it is. Give me this team over last year's team any day
Are you talking
in general.
last year's team when they got eliminated, like that roster, like against Tampa? Or
Uh,
are you talking
up
where they stand right now?
comparing pre-trade deadline to pre-trade deadline. Give me this year's team. We haven't hit, and yeah, basically, because I just think they're playing significantly better. I don't think you even need to look at stats to realize that.
The Rangers are playing significantly better. I'm with you. I
Yeah,
do. I think that they're pre-trade deadline to pre-trade deadline, yes. But is this roster currently constructed right now better than the team that lost to Tampa in Game 6? No,
I would argue
I don't think
yes.
so. I would disagree. And
Then
I really
again,
would
this
like
this is a
to.
conversation for about 2 months
Yeah.
from now.
Yeah, and again, we're gonna see where this roster ends up, um, and I think it's just a credit to last year's team. And once they got eliminated, like it was a really solid group from top to bottom. And if Tarasenko comes in and performs as we think he is going to perform, then at the end of the 2 months, my answer will probably change from no to yes. But we don't know how it's going to work. And the matter of the fact is, the players that the Rangers brought in at the deadline last year, Cop, Vetrano, and Mott, all three of those players were huge reasons why the Rangers got as far as they did. So Tarasenko is going to have that same impact, and Mikkola too.
Yep, yep. And just to end it on this, I actually kind of lost my train of thought there for a second as the radiator just goes off and low key scares the shit out of me. Um, the jump that the team has taken this year is arguably the jump that they should have taken last year. Because, like I said before, I do not think that the team took anywhere near as much of a step that most people were saying last year.
And that can be misconstrued with where they ended up, right?
Exactly.
You know,
But I
people.
know I know what I watched.
Right. And I think, this is not lost on me. And I know this is not lost on you. Shades, we could be sitting here right now and having a much different conversation about last year's team. We were this close to getting eliminated in 5 games by Pittsburgh in round one. We were this close. Very, very close.
Yeah.
So, hockey is a game of inches sometimes, and it came out, in the Rangers' favor. But yeah, I don't think they made the jump last year that they should have, and they look like much more of a complete team this season. And I'm saying that with Panarin not having his best year, the power play not stepping up, as it did last year, Chris Kreider having a little bit of a down season compared to where he was last year with 52 goals. So, I think it's a very interesting conversation to have. And again, only time will tell. I can't wait to see. But the Rangers finally took the step this season. And
Yes.
if their, trade deadline pieces that they're going to bring in are going to play as they should, sky's the limit for this group. Because I just watched Steve Dangle's review of the Tarasenko trade this morning. And
I have yet to watch that.
well, without giving up too much, the only thing I'll say about it is that Steve Dangle, from a Toronto Maple Leafs fan's perspective, he thinks very highly of the New York Rangers after this trade, extremely, and, views them as one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. So, I'm just saying that the perception around the league is that this Rangers team is complete and ready to win. And they are.
Well, time will tell come playoff time because you just never know.
Yeah, you just never know. And it all comes down to what their matchup is, right? We talked about
Exactly.
it when discussing Timo Meier. It could be a matchup like Washington or Pittsburgh, a team that both of you think that we could probably handle at this point, or it could be a matchup like the Devils or Carolina that might give us a little bit of trouble. So, you never know how the cookie's going to crumble, and we won't know until playoff time.
And speaking of playoff time, let's end before we go into the outro, let's end the episode on this. So, who ends up with the two Eastern Conference wildcard spots?
There are many players, many players. Wow. Well, there are certainly a lot of players, but there are many teams fighting for that second card
And
spot.
a lot of players on those teams.
And a lot of players on those teams, indeed. Right now, Washington and Pittsburgh are 1-2 in the Eastern Conference wildcard. 62 points for Washington, 61 for Pittsburgh. But the Islanders with 60 points, Florida with 58, Buffalo with 56, and Detroit is hanging around with 54 as well. Flyers with 54 too. I think we can eliminate those bottom two teams. For me, Shades, it comes down to Washington, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, Florida, and Buffalo if they can acquire some pieces to help their roster out at the trade deadline. And if I'm going to make a prediction right now on what two teams are going to be there, I'm going to take New York. I think New York's going to be there. I think they might be the second wild card, but I just they're going through arguably their toughest stretch of the year right now after acquiring Bo Horvat. Lane Lambert, was not happy following the team's latest loss. So, yeah, they have 60 points right now. Of course, Pittsburgh has 4 games in hand on them, but I love Sorokin. I think Horvat's been a nice addition, and I think this team has the potential to squeak in. Florida's been so underwhelming. Shades, it's hard for me to sit here and say Florida's going to be a playoff team.
Just a side note, that trade has not worked out for either team, the Tkachuk trade.
Is not. And again, we were talking about perceptions at the beginning of the season. I think if we were to go back and listen to this episode right now on February 13th and hear that the trade hasn't worked out for either team, we'd probably be pretty stunned. But just to wrap it up, I think it's going to be Florida and the Islanders. I think Washington and Pittsburgh are finally going to miss the playoffs, and I think Buffalo's going to get close, but no cigar.
I'll go Islanders and Penguins.
Islanders and Penguins. Okay.
If you had a gun to my head and I had to pick right now, Islanders and Penguins, because I've told this to you the prior 2 seasons when we've done our preseason predictions. I'm not picking the Penguins to miss the playoffs until they actually do, or until a team noticeably improves during the offseason, like I thought that the Senators would this and Detroit would this year, but hasn't happened yet. So,
well, the Devils, they are that team, and it hasn't pushed Pittsburgh out of a playoff spot, but it's pushed them out of that top 3. That top 3 in the Metro. If you had asked, polled NHL fans prior to the year, I'm pretty sure the consensus would have been Carolina, the Rangers, probably Pittsburgh. And New Jersey has taken that spot. Pittsburgh is brought down to the wild card, and they're in danger of missing the playoffs. But I'll respond to you, Shades, in saying this. I have predicted Pittsburgh to miss the playoffs multiple years in a row, and I'm not going to stop now. So Pittsburgh's not going to make the playoffs, and it's going to be the Islanders and Florida. But of course, when Pittsburgh makes the playoffs and squeaks their way in and makes it to the conference finals, I'll look like an idiot and I'll put my clown makeup on. But right now, Pittsburgh, not a lot of confidence sparked in that group. The goaltending is a little bit iffy. Tristan Jarry had a good year last year. He hasn't been able to stay on the ice. Casey DeSmith, I don't trust as a backup to take you through the playoffs. And Chris Letang coming off of a stroke, the depth, isn't necessarily where it was. And the Penguins are questioning Mike Sullivan behind the bench. So I just, it's just too many questions for me, but I won't be shocked if they make the playoffs. It will be the same reaction I've had every single year before this, where they have overexceeded expectations.
I will say, though, I would absolutely love if the Sabres made the playoffs.
So would I.
I would absolutely love that. Just considering where that team has been. And where they started the season, frankly.
Right. And like I said, before, I think, them making the playoffs is going to necessitate a couple moves at the trade deadline. But there's an opening here. There is an opening here because the Islanders have more games played than any of those teams mentioned. And which team has the least amount of games played?
The Sabres.
Washington, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, Florida, and Buffalo. It's Buffalo.
So, and they also have the second best goal differential of any team in the wild card hunt. And that's +11. Who's number 1? +12 in Washington. But the Sabres have 4 games in hand on them. So Buffalo now I kind of want to see them make the playoffs, man.
And who would they play? They would play Boston if they made it into the second wild card spot. And I'm not saying that series would go well, but Buffalo needs, playoff experience. And I would love if
Yes,
they were able to get it this year. And just to see a playoff game back at KeyBank Center again would be special.
absolutely.
Because
So
coming
you're
from Oswego, upstate New York, Sabres fans want a winning hockey team back again. And,
yes.
the fact that they have something close to that right now, they're getting teased.
Yeah, actually, yeah, they kind of are. So your final two predictions were the Islanders and
Florida.
Florida. All
But
right.
I want to but I want to say that Washington will be close in the race. Pittsburgh, yeah, you could put them like all the way down.
All right. So you got the
Screw
Islanders and
them.
you got the Islanders and the Panthers. I got the Penguins and the Islanders. So yeah, gonna be. I love hockey when it gets down to the nitty gritty.
Because it's so important to have good stretches at the beginning of the year, so that you're
Yep.
not scrambling to pick up points come playoff time.
Yep.
And I feel like we're discussing 5 teams that once we get closer to the end of the year, they're all going to be scrambling. And once these two teams play each other, any of these two teams, when we get a Pittsburgh versus Buffalo game, it's going to mean a lot more than it meant, way back in, March of last year or a few years ago when, Buffalo would come to Pittsburgh. Nobody would give a shit because Buffalo stunk. Now they don't, they're in a playoff race. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, man. Now that football's over, I can fully like just I don't want to say zone in because there's been one football game the last 2 weeks, but I can finally not have anything distracting me along the way the rest of the regular season. So yeah,
yep.
yeah, Ben, Jesus, what a hell of an episode. And you muted yourself again.
This has been I got to do it once an episode.
Yes.
I didn't do it this time. Yeah, it's been
At
a
least
loaded
you waited
episode.
till the outro this time.
Yeah, no, exactly. So and not an important thing I said either. So but yeah, I think it's been a loaded episode.
Yeah.
And again, we'll see what's to come with the Rangers and Tarasenko, the trade deadline for multiple teams, Erik Karlsson possibly on the move, Timo Meier as well. And what's going to be the answer to these final 2 wild card spots in the Eastern Conference. And yeah, and I just do want to point this out as well, and we don't have to go into a discussion about this, but it's just something I forgot to add when we were having the Kings discussion. The Kings did offer the Coyotes a first-round pick and Gabe Vilardi in the offseason for Jakob Chychrun, and the Coyotes said no. So that just puts into perspective what the asking price is. Arizona is not going to get fleeced on this deal. They're getting fair value back because Jakob Chychrun, he has an argument for being the best defensive defenseman in the league. So just thought it was an interesting tidbit because I know you're very high on Gabe Vilardi. So,
Well, I mean, he's 11th overall pick. He's having a good season. So
he is.
Yeah. So I mean, I really got nothing else. Do you?
I don't.
Yeah. Shit, man. What an I'm just dude.
It's
What an
funny.
episode.
We didn't have a lot of topics today. I thought, maybe 6 or 7 topics, but we went with it for sure. So,
Oh hell yeah. Fuck, hell of an hour and a half. Jesus Christ. I swear to God, before we started recording, I thought we were gonna go like 45 minutes max, and now here we are over an hour and a half.
there you go. Love to talk hockey for sure. Did you get those your stopwatch working there to so when you're editing this
Sort of.
monstrosity you won't have okay.
Yeah, I kind of screwed up a little bit, but I think I'll be all right.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope everyone has enjoyed a drink of choice if you decided to have one during the episode. This has been episode 35. It's amazing. I do this every episode. This has been episode 35 of Pucks and Brews. As always, follow us on all of our social medias listed in the description below. Liam, I got to start putting your socials in the description because I just plain have been forgetting to do so. So I apologize for that.
It's okay. No worries. But
Yeah.
we'll have it up this episode.
Yeah, you get so used to copying and pasting stuff that you don't even register putting new stuff in. But yeah, follow us on our socials listed in the description below. Liam's will be in the description from now on moving forward. And Woj's and Brendan's are going to stay there as much as Brendan doesn't use his socials, but going to keep them in there. Actually, I don't even know if whatever. Brendan's might not even be in there to begin with. Who knows? I, I don't even know anymore. Guarantee you he won't even care if he gets followers anyway. But
Hopefully,
yeah,
we'll have Brendan here soon.
we
Right?
almost did today, but he
Trying.
wasn't home.
Yeah, almost wasn't home, but hopefully sometime soon. Miss that
Soon.
kid. Miss Woj too.
I saw Brendan yesterday, but I miss him like for podcast purposes because he hasn't been. It's been like over a year at this point, and I miss Woj too.
For me, I haven't seen Brendan. Oh my gosh, it's been north of 3 years at this point. Still
Jeez.
text me, still talk about Chelsea, still talk about hockey and the Rangers, but yeah, it'll be cool to see his face again. Definitely.
Well, I got to see it yesterday because we hung out for the Super Bowl. So, anyway, so for like the fourth time, follow us on all of our socials down below. I'm not gonna set a day for the next episode because the last two episodes I've done that or three, and we've had to record out of nowhere. So we will probably be back within the next two. Well, no, we're definitely going to be back within the next 2 weeks. The exact day to be determined because, like I said, not doing that again. It's already been ruined a couple times this year. But yeah, we will continue to crank out episodes. Hope everyone enjoyed the Super Bowl. Hope everyone, won some money if you bet on it. Hope everybody enjoyed the food if they went to some parties yesterday or made something for themselves, even if you got like a pizza or something. Hope everybody enjoyed the game. And yeah, we'll be back. And we got the Western Canada road trip coming up this week. Ooh.
Let's just hope Edmonton trades for Erik Karlsson after the Rangers play them, please.
This is very good point. So yeah, this has been Pucks and Brews. I have been your host, Michael Shade Sparacino, alongside Liam the Chillmaster Godimer, and we will be back probably with a shorter episode next time. See you later, everyone.